Today we are going to do an oil change on the beast, the Cayenne Turbo S. I'm Justin, and that over there is cousin Rob, and this is Husman Bros. And before we go too much further, please subscribe for more content like this. So as you guys know, we put on an armor plate underneath the truck, and that changes how we have to change the oil. So we thought we'd show you what it takes to change the oil. Most of this will apply to any first gen Cayenne, except for removing the armored plate. So Rob, let's go ahead and get started and do it.
Sounds great, let's do it.
The first step for us is we have to take this plate off that we put on. This is the Eurowise front armor plate, and it's actually it's loose. That probably is the rattle we have.
It is probably a rattle.
So we have to take this off. Not everybody will have to do this, but this is a heavy plate. We're using our floor stand to support it. Pretty straightforward. This is a really easy job. This is probably the hardest part we have to do is take this off. So here we go. Rob's got it supported and we're going to get started. So Rob and I actually did this oil change without making a video. I know, shocking, right? Back in November. And I guess what we're seeing is that we should be going back in and checking these bolts after we put it back on. I don't remember them being that loose when we changed them in November, but they must have backed out in those couple of months since. So we're going to try to find a solution for that too, and if we can, we'll let you know what that looks like. So when we started taking this off, as you saw, there were 2 out of the 5 bolts in here, and there should be 6 bolts in here, were hand tight. So we did an oil change for this in November, and we did tighten it down, but they must have backed out.
Oh, sorry.
And I suspect that we lost one of those bolts itself when it backed out. So let's go ahead and get this thing off, and we'll make sure we tighten them up better next time. So as you see, this has some pretty serious surface rust on it. I knew that because when I go out to Cars and Coffee on Sunday, everybody bitches about how rusty my plate is. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to take this off again in the future. I'm going to take it over to a friend's and we're going to Cerakote this to protect it. But if you're buying this piece from Eurowise, I would suggest that you spray it with a clear coat or something before you install it just to prevent this surface rust. So in a Cayenne, we actually have 2 spots where the oil drains out. We have the first one here, which is the main. The second one is up higher. We need to drain both of these. First you drain the lower and then you drain the higher. Well, whoops. So as you see, we've got the drain plug out in the front here and it is still running. We've been letting it run for about 5 minutes. We're going to pull the second plug here in a moment and then let that drain the rest of it. And we'll actually let everything drain out for a little bit after that to get as much out as we can. Okay, so we've let this drain for a little while and now as you see it's dripping, so we've got to open that second plug. I'm just going to hand thread this in to stop the dripping and try to prevent a bit of a mess here. The oil came hot and fast at me. It was a little warmer than I expected, but I managed to get almost none on the floor, so I'm good. It all ended up on me, which is pretty standard. So let me clean up a little bit, but we took off the second one. As you see, it's flowing, and once it starts flowing a little less, I'll pull this other one and we'll let it drain for just a little bit to get as much out as we can. Although, Rob made a good point in that this truck does burn a little bit of oil and apparently leaks a little bit as well. So I've basically done half an oil change in the time since we changed this, so oil looks pretty good. So the reservoir up top is a little bit smaller. I'm going to pull this other drain plug and going to let them both flow for just a little bit to get as much out as we can before we pull the filter. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put these in so I can remove the oil filter because it's going to have some oil around it as well. This has been dripping for probably 15 minutes or so, so I think we've got most of what we need out of it. And I know we've got some watch spotters. If you can put in the comments what my watch is, I'm curious how knowledgeable you are. Take our filter off now. Now this is a canister filter, and as you see, I moved my drain pan over here because there will be some oil that comes out with this filter. We will link to all the oil and filters that you'll need in the comments down below, as well as the installation video for our plate. There we go. Let that run for a minute.
You know, so here we have the oil filter. We've extracted it. Keep in mind, Porsche tends to use a cartridge style oil filter, so there's a canister right here. I like just to clean it out. Always make sure you clean the ridges. Always make sure also you replace this gasket here. Always comes with an oil filter. Another best practice is to lube it really good with fresh oil before you put it back up in there. Now, there is a torque setting for this, but essentially once this is seated, using the oil filter socket, I get it to where it's just snug up against the motor, and that's good enough. Another thing that comes up, and I think it's normal to say, is you say, okay, well, this canister, I guess I replace that every time. No, you keep the canister. This is something that you'll want to keep. I like to keep it, like I said, nice and clean in between oil changes, but don't throw it away because you'll have to go buy another one. And they, although they're not expensive, they're not cheap either. But if you throw it away, you have no way to put the oil filter back in. So yeah. Anyway, one thing that you do want to do is you want to kind of come in here and look inside the oil filter. A lot of folks will literally cut them, right, and open them up completely. And what you're generally looking for are metal particles, right? You want to look at the front side and back side to see if you see any metal particles. That's an indication of internal engine damage, and of course that's not a good thing. You want to do that with earlier Boxsters. I know we're doing a Cayenne video, but you really want to pay attention on earlier Boxsters because of the old dreaded infamous IMS bearing issue. On these cars, it's usually not so much of a challenge, but I still like to kind of poke through them and see if there's anything just glaring, any plastic parts, any metal parts. One thing to remember, this vehicle has 148,000 miles. The mileage is, it's sneaking up there. And so we just want to be proactive in making sure that there's normal, that there's just a normal filter comes out versus something that has, a bunch of crud. So on that note, I'm going to toss this before any more of this could possibly leak on me. So you can see I've already put the filter in the canister. It's easy. It just pushes in. It's minimal resistance. You can see that it doesn't matter which way the filter goes in. It's the same on both ends. It's got a little bit of a gasket here. One end goes down in the bottom of the filter. The other one, of course, will go up into the fitting inside the motor. What we like to do is we like to take this old gasket off, right? The old washer or old gasket off. You can see I use just a pick, just pulls right off. What we'll do then is we'll thread the new one on, and then what I will do is I'll come in and put a good amount of oil on it so that it gets nice and bathed with oil, so that when we put it up inside the motor, it's got a nice solid seat. You can see now it just rolls on. It's pretty easy, just like that. I'll get new oil and put a nice coating around that. Then we'll go ahead and put it up into the motor block. And like I said, cinch it down just till it doesn't move anymore. We don't need to over tighten this. Okay, so now we're at the point where we've hand threaded it as tight as we can. So now we're gonna go back and get our 3/8 inch drive, and we're gonna drive it up into this. And you can see there's a bit of resistance on it, but it's not bad. And then what happens is, right there. Now, once I get it to this point, I'll just give it a little tough like that. Just no more than that, because at that point, it's in there very well. What's gonna happen is that rubber is going to expand anyway as it goes through heat cycles, and it'll actually get tighter. We don't want to tighten it really any more than that. So that's it. Generally, you're going to have to probably knock this off because it's usually up in there pretty tight. That's actually good that it's in there tight, because if it's loose, it would have trouble gripping the plastic ears on all the way around it and pulling it off. So I'm going to go tug on this. You'll excuse me while I grunt on this for a second. The torque spec for the oil drain bolts is 37 foot-pounds, so we've used that and adjusted it on our torque wrench here. And then I very carefully, because once again, the oil drain bolts tend to be, they're just finicky, right? Porsche uses a bolt or a fastener that has a Allen wrench in the middle, and it's aluminum, very soft. Man, they strip. Ask me how many I've stripped over the years, or encountered one that was already stripped. And then you have to come up with some creative ways to get it out. We actually moved to a stainless steel bolt with a magnet inside, so we can actually then look for debris coming from the engine and settling on the oil drain bolt. It's a great, easy, inexpensive way to see if you've got internal engine damage or wear. Because when you pull it out, there's almost always going to be what I would call a little bit of metallic sludge on it, but you can tell it's not really load bearing or damage, because it's really very soft and very sludgy. But if it's actual particles, now we're talking about something that's potentially catastrophic. So that's why when I pull these out, I look at them, I make sure there's no metal particles attached. In this case, there was not, just a tiny bit of sludge. Once again, I view that as normal. Then very carefully, you'll notice when I put this in there, I'm really super careful, holding it up very tight and giving it a good little right there. If I was working at Porsche, I don't know that I would put these spec that tight. I think 37 foot-pounds is a little excessive, just me, but still, that is the spec, so in theory, that's what you should do it. The challenge is if you're using that softer aluminum, it's a round It has the Allen wrench in the middle. That's a tough spec for that very soft aluminum because it's also just a very small Allen wrench. So I wholeheartedly suggest replacing them with a metal oil drain bolt. These are available on Amazon. We'll link it down below in the description. But do yourself a favor, upgrade the oil filler bolts and save yourself some hassle. Trust me, this is based on personal experience.
So what we found when we took this off is a lot of these were loose. So we put just a hair of blue Loctite on it, and then we're going to tighten them to 37 foot-pounds to see if they back out or not. Now this is threaded up into riv nuts. So while we did 37 foot-pounds, we didn't want to do a whole lot more because we didn't want to pull those riv nuts out. So I think it's solid now. We'll see. I'm about to go on a trip and we'll see how much they back out. I'm a Mobil 1 guy because somewhere around here, Mobil 1 paid for a sticker in the engine bay. So we're doing Mobil 1 Synthetic Supercar 0W40. So the manual calls for 8.9 quarts of oil, but I do burn a little oil, so we'll probably put 9 quarts in here. So we'll see how it looks. A 2, a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 2 spares so I can make it home. And now let's just check it, make sure it didn't all run out. As we see, it's a little bit over the fill mark, but that makes sense because we do have to fill the filter and distribute through the engine, so it should all be okay when we're done. And that is the oil change for a Porsche. Oh, wait.
I about to say,
you know what? I did this once.
I did this
so
once.
I did, and I was halfway to the Ranger game before I had, what is that on my windshield?
Yes.
It's oil. So last step is make sure you go ahead and put this on nice and tight and then have fun with it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. We will link to all the supplies you need to do this down below. See you later.